There is a version of you that reaches for the phone the moment you wake up, that fills every silence with noise, every free hour with something, anything, just to stay occupied, that postpones the hard conversation, the risky move, the honest look in the mirror, that lives as if time is endless, as if the list of one day I will never runs out. But that version of you is not lazy, not distracted, not simply tired. That version of you is running. And you've been running for so long, you forgot there was something behind you. There is. You are going to die. Not as an idea, not as something distant. That happens to other people. You, the person reading this, with your specific fears, your specific regrets, your unfinished business, you will stop existing. Everyone you love will stop existing. Everything you've built, everything you've earned, everything you've held on to will disappear without a trace. And somewhere beneath all the noise you've surrounded yourself with, you already know this. You've always known. The problem is not that you don't know. The problem is what you've done with that knowledge. Ernest Becker spent his life trying to understand what humans do when they face this truth, and what he found was not comforting. In The Denial of Death, he argued that awareness of death creates a fear so deep, so unbearable, that almost everything in human life, culture, religion, status, ambition, even love, can be seen as a defense against it. Not a solution, a distraction, a way to avoid sitting with what you already know. And here is the danger. It works. It works so well, and that you can spend years, decades, living as if time is not the one thing you can never get back, working toward things you don't actually want, staying in situations that drain you, telling yourself, I'll start when the moment is right. But the moment is never right. Because if it were, you would have to start. And if you started, you would have to admit you've been waiting. And if you admitted that, you would have to ask, what exactly have I been waiting for? This is not here to comfort you. It will not give you a 5-step plan for a better life. It will do something far less pleasant and far more necessary. It will show you how avoidance works, how it was built, what it costs you, and what becomes possible when you finally face it. By the end, you will understand why the life you are living may not be as much yours as you think, why the things you chase may serve a purpose you never consciously chose, and why the one thing you've been avoiding your entire life might be the only thing that can wake you up. It will be uncomfortable. It should be. Comfort is how you got here. Every animal on this planet lives under the threat of death. The deer senses the predator and runs. The danger passes and it returns to grazing. No residue, no dread, no late-night spirals about its own extinction. The deer does not lie awake wondering if its life meant something. You do, and that is what makes the human condition different from everything else alive. Not intelligence, not language, not cities, not symphonies. This. You are the only creature that knows in advance it will die, and still has to live with that knowledge. Ernest Becker called this the terrible dilemma of human existence. You have a mind that can grasp infinity and a body that will decay. You can imagine forever, but you will not last a century. And you must hold both truths at the same time every single day without collapsing. Most people solve this by not solving it, by deciding, without fully deciding, not to think about it. But here is the key. The fear does not disappear just because you stop looking at it. Repression is not resolution. The anxiety does not vanish because you refuse to name it. It goes underground. And from there, it shapes your life far more than you realize. What you pursue, what you avoid, who you become, the fear you never consciously face is still making your decisions. It just does it quietly, below the surface, where you cannot question it, where you cannot see it. Ernest Becker offered an argument so simple, it almost feels impossible to accept. Most of what humans do, ambition, status, the need for approval, religion, constant busyness, is not what it appears to be. Beneath the surface, there is something older, something more primal, a need to feel significant in a universe that is completely indifferent to your existence, a need to matter, to leave a mark, to prove, against all evidence, that your life meant something permanent in a world where nothing is. Think back to the last time you truly felt the fear of death, not as an idea, but physically, a close call, a diagnosis, a funeral that came too close. And notice how quickly you returned to normal, how fast the armor went back on, how efficiently your mind slipped back into the familiar pattern, acting as if nothing happened. That speed is not strength. It is not resilience. It is a system, working exactly as it was designed to, keeping the fear contained, hidden, managed, keeping you functional and, in Becker's words, asleep. The same mechanism that protects you from the terror of death is the one that keeps you from fully living. You cannot have one without the other, and that is the trap, the one you were born into, simply by being human, simply by being the kind of being that can look at its own end and understand it. So the real question becomes, what is your armor made of? What did you build to keep the fear away? And more importantly, what has it cost you? In the next part, we go deeper into what Becker called character armor, and you may begin to see how much of what you call your personality is not expression, but protection. If this is speaking to you, subscribe to the channel. It helps more than you think. You believe your identity is something you discovered. Your values, your behavior, the way you move through the world, the role you play at work, at home, in every room you enter, it feels like yours, something natural, something real. And Becker would not take that away from you entirely, but he would ask, look closer. When was it built? And why? Because the armor does not begin in adulthood. It begins much earlier, in childhood, before you had the words to describe what you felt, before you had any real choice in how to respond. A child meets a world that is overwhelming, unpredictable, vast, and often indifferent. And in response, the child builds a self, a version that can survive, a version that earns love, avoids punishment, manages fear, a version that works. And because it works, you keep it, you refine it, you improve it, adjust it, strengthen it. And over time, you forget it was ever a construction at all. That forgetting is the trap. Søren Kierkegaard described this state with unsettling precision, not as being fake, not as pretending, but as something deeper, more dangerous, living inauthentically, not belonging to yourself, acting from a center that isn't yours, following scripts you inherited, from people who were also following scripts they inherited, and no one ever stopping long enough to ask, was any of this actually chosen? The armor works through identification. You become the successful one, the responsible one, the one who has it together, or the rebel, the cynic, the one who needs no one. These identities are not random. They were chosen, without you knowing, for a reason, to give you a sense of permanence in a world that has none, to make you feel solid, continuous, real. Because if you are something, defined, named, recognizable, then maybe the fact that one day you will be nothing feels slightly less terrifying. This is why the armor is so difficult to examine. It is not just habit, not just comfort. It is doing real work, psychological work, holding existential fear at a distance you can tolerate. The one who cannot stop working is not just ambitious. The one who cannot be alone is not just social. The one who fills every silence with a screen is not just distracted. They are managing something they were never taught to face directly, and over time, the strategy became the identity. And here is the cost. An identity built to manage fear instead of express truth will slowly suffocate the person inside it. You begin to live defensively, optimizing for safety, for approval, for stability, for maintaining the structure, instead of moving toward what you actually want. The years pass. The armor holds. and somewhere beneath it, the life you could have lived waits, patient, unanswered. Ernest Becker was not trying to make you feel guilty for building this armor. He understood it was necessary, but what he demanded was clarity, to see it as it is, without distortion, without self-deception, so that you can finally ask the question the armor was built to prevent. Who are you when you are not protecting yourself? And what have you been chasing that was never truly yours? That question leads directly to what comes next. There are projects that organize your entire life around a goal you never consciously chose. No one told you that you were trying to defeat death. That's not how it appears. What you see instead is ambition, drive, the desire to build something that lasts, to be recognized, to leave a mark. It feels like movement forward, like you are moving towards something. But Ernest Becker made a claim that is difficult to accept. Most of the time, you are not moving towards something. You are moving away from the knowledge that none of it will last. He called them heroic projects, and everyone has one. The career that defines you, the legacy you are building, the number in your bank account that will finally make you feel safe, the reputation you cultivate in rooms full of people whose opinion you decided matters. These projects are not meaningless. That was never the claim. But they carry something hidden, a deeper motive. Beneath the visible goal, there is an older ambition, to matter beyond your own lifetime, to become something that does not simply disappear, to win in some symbolic way against a universe that does not notice you at all. And the problem begins when the project is the wrong one. Not wrong by someone else's standards, wrong by yours. Because most people did not choose their project. They absorbed it from parents who needed you to succeed in a certain way, from culture that measures worth in a specific currency, from every room you grew up in, where certain behaviors were rewarded and others were quietly punished. You took all of that in, built a life around it, and have been executing it ever since, faithfully, mistaking inheritance for desire, mistaking compliance for ambition. And here is the most difficult part. A person can spend an entire life, disciplined, focused, relentless, chasing a heroic project, and arrive at the end, at the final moment, when the armor finally falls away, and realize something devastating. They were the hero of someone else's story. That what they sacrificed decades for was never truly theirs. That the life they were so busy building was a very elaborate way of not asking what they actually wanted. And by then, the question comes too late. This is not a small mistake. This is the central one. The one Ernest Becker spent his life trying to name. What makes it so difficult to recognize is that the wrong project can look exactly like the right one. From the outside, it looks like success. From the inside, it often feels the same. It produces real results, real status, real achievements, evidence that by every measurable standard, you are doing well. The armor is convincing, the project is impressive, and the emptiness underneath, that quiet, persistent sense that something is missing, gets misinterpreted. You call it ingratitude, or not enough success yet, or a flaw in your personality, but it is none of those things. It is a signal, and that signal is worth listening to, because it is trying to tell you the project you are executing is managing your fear of death, not expressing your actual life. And those two things are not the same. They were never the same thing. But realizing that the project is wrong, that is not the hardest part. The hardest part comes later. When the armor stops working, when something breaks through and forces a confrontation you were never prepared for, a moment you cannot postpone, cannot manage, cannot reframe, and that moment comes for everyone. Not the abstract idea of death, not the philosophical version you can think about from a safe distance, the real one, the diagnosis that rewrites your future, the phone call in the middle of the night, the funeral of someone your age, a birthday that forces a calculation you didn't want to make. Everyone gets at least one. Most people get several. And what Ernest Becker noticed is not what you would expect. The people who fall apart the most in these moments are not the weakest. They are often the most functional, the most composed, the most in control, the ones with the strongest armor, the most convincing identity, the most complete system for keeping fear at a distance. Because the armor does not make you stronger, it makes you dependent. And when the thing it was built to hold back finally breaks through, there is nothing underneath. No ability to sit with the truth, no relationship with limitation, no inner structure built from facing reality, only raw fear, hitting someone who spent a lifetime making sure they would never feel it. This is not a personal failure, it is a cultural one. Modern life is designed to keep death invisible. The dying are removed from daily life, hidden in hospitals. Death becomes a technical problem, a medical event, something to fix, not something to understand. Children are shielded from it. Adults are discouraged from thinking about it. And everything around you, entertainment, noise, constant stimulation, serves one function: to keep you occupied. So you never stay still long enough to feel what is underneath. And it works until it doesn't. Because what is suppressed does not disappear. It leaks. It shows up. As a vague anxiety you cannot explain, as irritation toward people who remind you of your own fragility, as a need to surround yourself with people who think like you, who validate your worldview, your values, your way of living. Because anyone who lives differently quietly threatens the story you built about what makes life meaningful. The fear you refuse to face begins shaping everything: your decisions, your relationships, your beliefs. Even those nights when nothing is wrong, but something feels deeply off. That feeling is not random. It is the crack in the armor, and the crack is not the problem. It is the first honest thing that has happened in a long time. Because on the other side of that crack, there is something else. Not just collapse, but the possibility of a completely different relationship with your time. Not panic, not obsession, not fear, something quieter, something deeper, something far more radical than anything you have known so far. The Stoicism understood this. Ernest Becker understood this too. To face mortality, not as a wound, but as a tool. The sharpest one you have, a blade that cuts through everything that does not matter. Every system around you in some way tries to make you feel better. Therapy softens, religion consoles, self-help reframes. Even the people who love you most will reach for comfort when you are in pain. Death does not. Death tells you the truth, and then waits to see what you do with it. The Stoics had a name for this: memento mori. Remember, yes, you will die. Not as despair, but as clarity, a daily practice. Marcus Aurelius returned to this idea again and again, not because he was obsessed with death, but because he understood something simple. Without the reminder, the mind assumes time is infinite, and when time feels infinite, everything can wait. The hard conversation, the project you abandoned, the truth about what you actually want, all of it gets postponed, given to a future version of you who will be more ready, more brave, more free, a version of you that may never exist. But Becker's insight goes even deeper. A real life, one that is actually yours, cannot begin until you stop pretending the clock isn't running. Facing death does not reduce life. It restores its weight. Suddenly, the trivial becomes visible. The argument that consumed your energy reveals itself as meaningless. The approval you built your behavior around loses its grip. Not because you stop caring, but because you finally see clearly. You recover proportion. Something the denial was quietly stealing from you all along. There's a simple way to make this real. Write your obituary. Not the one that would be written based on your current life. The one you want, who you became, what you built, what you said, what you gave, what you allowed yourself to feel. Then look at the distance between that and where you are now. That distance is not a judgment. It is a map. the most honest one you will ever create. Not just showing what needs to change, but why you have not changed it. Use it. Not as a dark fantasy, but as a filter. When you face a decision that feels overwhelming, ask one question. At the end of my life, looking back, will I regret doing this? Or will I regret not doing it? The answer is more consistent than you think. Across cultures, across lives, people do not regret what they did. They regret what they never allowed themselves to do. The risks you never took, the words you never said, the version of yourself you never allowed to exist because the timing wasn't right and the fear was too loud. So instead, you avoided it. There is only one way through that. Practice letting go, deliberately, regularly, in small ways. A possession you are attached to, a role that no longer fits, a relationship that has become armor instead of connection, because death is the final act of letting go of everything. At once, and those who never practiced it arrive there unprepared. But those who have practiced letting go understand something different. What remains, after you release what was never truly yours, is not emptiness, it is space. And in that space, for the first time, something real can begin. The Stoicism, Ernest Becker, the Buddhism, the existentialism, all point to the same truth. A truth that feels backward at first. Mortality is not what makes life meaningless. Denying mortality is what does. The urgency, the presence, the intensity of being alive. None of it is available while you are running. It only appears when you stop. Turn around and face what has been behind you all along, and what you find there is not what you feared. But reaching that point requires something most people never manage, and that is where everything changes. Here is the truth Ernest Becker spent his life moving toward. The life you are living right now, its pace, its priorities, its quiet compromises, its postponed dreams, its background dissatisfaction you have learned to call normal, is only possible because somewhere deep inside, you believe you have more time than you actually do. That belief is the lie, and it is costing you everything. Not in a dramatic way, not something visible from the outside. The cost is subtle, personal. It appears in the version of yourself you keep postponing, in the conversation you haven't had, in the work you haven't committed to because commitment would make failure real, in the love you haven't fully given because full exposure feels dangerous, in the years that quietly pass while you feel as if you are watching your life instead of living it. Present enough to function, distant enough to never be touched by anything deeply. The denial of death called this the denial of death, but it could just as easily be called the denial of life. Because when you truly confront mortality, not as an idea but as something real, something breaks. The armor cracks, and it does not go back together the same way. And what returns is not theory. It is your life, this day, this moment, this person in front of you, this work that either matters to you or doesn't. The illusion of infinite time falls away, and what remains is something more uncomfortable and more alive than anything you were holding on to before. The present moment, unfiltered, unmanaged, real, and that is where change begins. Not in plans, not in intentions, not in lists, but here. Those things can help. Plans, tools, methods, but they remain tools, and tools only work when the person holding them has changed what they are building. The change Ernest Becker points toward is not behavioral. It is deeper. It is ontological, a shift in what you believe yourself to be, not something eternal, briefly interrupted by death, but something finite, a being whose limitation is not a flaw, but the very thing that makes every choice matter. And when you truly see that, something unexpected happens. Life does not suddenly become grand. The smallness remains. The ordinary stays. But it changes meaning. The ordinary moment is no longer something to skip. it becomes precise, unrepeatable. The difficult thing you have been avoiding loses its power because something else becomes more frightening, reaching the end and realizing you never faced it. You stop waiting for your life to feel important enough, and you begin giving it your attention anyway. This is not comfortable. It was never meant to be, but it is real. And real, no matter how difficult, is worth more than the most perfect illusion. You will die. You do not know when. Everyone you loved will die. Everything you build will disappear. And none of that is the tragedy you were taught to believe. The tragedy was never death. The tragedy was the life left unlived while you were busy pretending it wasn't coming. So stop pretending. Start now. If something here unsettled you, do not ignore it. Stay with it. Look at it directly, because that discomfort is not the problem. It is the beginning. And if you are ready, then continue, because walking away now would be the easiest thing to do. And also, exactly what you have always done.